Welcome to how to read a food label. So when we start tracking our food and we're trying to figure out, how do I hit these calories, protein, etc., it can get a little frustrating. So reading a food label and knowing how to read and analyze that is going to make it easier, especially when we are grocery shopping. It's also going to allow us to understand, what it is that we're putting in our cart and maybe avoiding some hokey marketing materials that are on the front of the bag. This is my biggest pet peeve. I am a marketing major that specializes in consumer behavior, so I know what the companies are trying to do to get you to pick that bag up off the shelf. So I'll get off that soapbox. Here's where we're gonna start. So when we are looking at our food label, we want to look at the calories and we want to look at the serving size. Like that's step number one, so that we understand how calorically dense this is and what the serving size is going to look like. So when we're looking at this, it says a half cup and then it says, 36 grams. Now it's going to show you both a measurement as in cups and it's going to give you a weight. Now, what you need to understand about food labels is that measurement is what this weight is estimated to look like. So it's supposed to give you a visual, which is great. However, we can fill a measuring cup really, really full, or we can underfill it, which is why when we're using a food scale, we track with weight, because that's where this caloric count is actually coming from, and it gives us what the true portion size is going to look like. And again, these calories are made up from the fats, carbs, and protein that are listed on the back here. So again, carbs and protein are going to be 4 calories per gram, and the fats are going to be 9 calories per gram. That's going to equal your caloric total. Every now and again, it is not going to equal that caloric total, and I do want to talk about that for a moment. First thing we need to understand is that food labels can be up to 20% inaccurate on the caloric count based on the actual math here. So sometimes it'll say 110 calories, but when you actually math it out, it's 150 calories. So there's 30 calories missing, but it's still technically within that range. So the food labels can get away with it. The other thing that they can do is when we look at things like dietary fiber, they can subtract out the fiber from the net carbs, because not all fiber is soluble. So yes, we do still digest it, and yes, it does still have calories. It's not the full 4 calories per gram that regular carbs are, but there are still calories there, and we should just count them, because it gets way too kludgy if we don't, and you're still going to see that it matters in the long run when it comes to calorie deficit. So that's the other marketing thing that they can do to tell you that something is low carb or lower in calories than what it really is. Especially you'll see this on high fiber, like carb balance things. You'll go on the back and it'll say that there are like 25 grams of carbs, but there's 14 grams of fiber. So they'll list it that there's only 11 grams of carbs. That's just not the truth. So those are some of the things that marketing wise are going to get to you. The other thing that we do want to pay attention to is call outs on things like protein. So a lot of times products are going to tell you that they are super high in protein. There's 10 grams of protein, 20 grams of protein. But when you flip it over, when you look at how many carbs to protein or fats to protein the ratio is, you're actually eating more of a carb source or a fat source. So in an instance like this, like let's say hypothetically, it calls out there's 10 grams of protein in here, but you flip it over and there's 40 grams of carbohydrates. Well, that gives us 200 calories. And of those 200 calories, 160 of them are going to be coming from carbs versus 40 of them coming from protein, which means it would be more of a carb source. So again, just things that we want to keep in mind when we are looking at call outs on labels and just putting on our critical thinking hat when we are shopping. This is also why I will always recommend majority of your food should come from the outer rim of the grocery store. Yes, we can pick up a couple of our favorite things to toss in to have in moderation, but we do want to make sure that majority of the food that goes on our plate came from that outer rim. Last thing that I want to cover as far as this weight goes at the top. Just because a label says that this is the serving size does not mean that is how much you can or cannot eat of it. So let's say you really do, you have extra carbs and you've been craving cereal and this works into it and you want to eat a serving and a half. You can do that. You just have to measure out what that would look like, track it appropriately, move on with your day. Also, if you've been craving cereal and it's really hard to fit a full serving into your day, one of my favorite hacks to do is to take a portion of that serving and pair it with something else. So in an instance like this, I would take half a serving of this cereal and put it on top of some yogurt, some Greek yogurt. So I'm getting more high quality protein there. That's gonna actually help keep me full. I'm still getting that delicious taste from the cereal that I wanted. It's a win-win. So those are things that, you know, looking at the food label can also help you with and allow you to, again, incorporate things you enjoy in an appropriate manner in your day. So again, also just want to reiterate that this is why we do use a food scale. I don't want to get too far into the weeds with it, but we do want to pay attention to how we measure and track things using that scale versus using measuring utensils like cups. And I promise it is going to get a little bit less cumbersome as you get into the swing of things here. And we're going to go over a lot more on how to measure things on that food scale in the how to use a food scale video. So stay tuned and let me know if you have any questions.